Tywyn was a close-knit rural Welsh community.
It was the ugliest of crimes in the most beautiful country.
The Reverend Emyr Owen, the servant of God, had become the servant of Satan.
Did this really happen? It did happen.
Hello and welcome back to Geek Legion of Doom. Today we're here to talk about a documentary which Leo was kind enough to ask me to watch and review, knowing my interest in true crime. This is called The REV and it was directed by Rhys Edwards. Did he do a good job? Was this worth a watch? Let's get into it. So, to give you something of a premise, but I don't want to tell you everything as I've seen in a couple of written reviews. I think maybe you can find out way too much about this before you go in. We go back to the 80s, 1985, specifically in North Wales, to a small rural village called Tywyn, and we follow the local community and mainly the Reverend, right at the centre of that, Emyr Owen. People maybe thought he had a tendency to be a little bit odd, but no one could quite have imagined what was going underneath the surface with Emyr Owen. Emyr grew up with a very strict background, which maybe has been suggested contributed to his behaviour in later life. As I say, I'm not going to give you a lot of information about that, but the crux of how the story starts, someone has been writing letters to people within the community. They are quite threatening in manner, they are littered with bad language, they even confess an admiration for Hitler and have a swastika drawn on. It gets a little bit beyond the poison pen letter when one lady in the community receives a threat to kill her 4-year-old granddaughter, and at this stage the police are called in to investigate. Obviously, as you can imagine, with this being called the REV, it becomes evident quite quickly who's responsible for this. I won't tell you how that's discovered, I will allow you to watch that in the documentary. But the main crux of what Emyr is guilty of becomes evident when Detective Inspector Gwyn Roberts goes to his home to put forward the proof that he may be responsible for these poison pen letters. And it's in this interaction that we find that Emyr is actually guilty of an awful lot more than a few poison pen letters. And that I will let you watch the documentary to find out. So I have to say, before I talk about the actual what I thought about the documentary, when the detective inspector visits Emyr's house, he's there to accuse him of being responsible for writing these letters. But in this visit, he questions Emyr's sexuality, even though there was no hint of anything like that in the letters. And he searches his house and he opens drawers and he finds a selection of material of books on certain subjects that are quite shocking for a reverend to have. We have Satanism, we have witchcraft, we have black magic, we have gay porn, we have torture information. Just things that you would not expect a 62-year-old, quite highly respected minister in a small Welsh town to have. But I found it really questionable that this policeman came and looked through his entire house and searched it and made accusations at this stage. But be that as it may, this is what actually happened. We actually have interviews with Gwyn Roberts today. These crimes go back to 40 years ago. We also have interview sections from Emyr Owen, which are very interesting to see. His character does come across as very, very odd. He reminded me in his interview style, if you ever saw the documentary called The Jinx, the guy in that, it really reminded me of that. There's just something inherently creepy when you watch him interviewed. We also have experts, legal experts, we have psychiatrists, we have graphologists, although I do have to say one of the graphologists, the expert in handwriting, indicated that she could tell if a person's sexuality by looking at their handwriting, which I felt was a bit, it did make me raise an eyebrow. It was a bit of a what moment. So with that as the premise of the documentary, as I say, we do find out bigger things as that goes on, which I think you should watch to find out. We also through that have interviews from these various different people involved or who have a expert opinion on what went on. We have recreations of events that happened, like that search that happened, like people receiving these letters, when the accusation was put to Emyr. We have all that throughout, and also after the main event of that visit to Emyr's house and things coming to light, we then look back at potentially young Emyr and his upbringing and what could potentially have led him to this point in his life today. So what worked and what didn't work about the REV? Okay, I'm one of these people, I want to end on a high point, so we'll do the negatives first. I really did enjoy this documentary. The only thing I would say is I felt that the main interest was in the first half an hour of this documentary. They gave you so much of interest immediately, and it was really gripping, it was really enthralling, and I was watching open-mouthed as everything unfolded in this documentary, really enjoying it. But when we got like half an hour in, 40 minutes in, and the crux of everything had already happened, I wondered how we were going to pad out the other 50 minutes of runtime. And in that, there's a lot of reflection back. There's a lot of attempting understanding with his upbringing. But I don't think the documentary ever really managed to attain that first half hour's riveting watch. Now, personally, as someone that loves true crime, that loves to watch true crime, that loves to understand the psyche of people and what makes them tick, I still enjoyed the documentary a great deal. I still was really interested in trying to work out what made Emyr do what he did. So that for me is not a massive downside, but I think your casual viewer that doesn't watch a lot of things of this ilk may find their attention drag a little bit from that half hour point onwards. Also, some of the recreations were a little bit comical. At times you could be forgiven for feeling like it's a spoof documentary. They just did come across as a little bit funny, and they weren't meant to, the actual scenes that I'm referring to, and in actual fact they perhaps weren't needed to tell the story. These came after the big reveal. Again, I still enjoyed the backstory. I like to know what makes people tick. I like to know a person's past and how that could have contributed to the person they become, but I do feel for some people that may pull them out of it. But as I say, it still didn't remove my enjoyment of it. It just maybe did make me sort of raise a little smile in places where perhaps I shouldn't have been. In saying that, the actors that play Emyr Owen and Gwyn Roberts both do a sterling job. That's not any reflection on the job that they did in the recreations. So really, that's all I have to say on a negative. And for me personally, I didn't feel that was enough to not make me want to watch the rest of this documentary. For me, most points I would make about this would be positive. I just feel I watch a lot of these sort of shows, a lot of these programs. This is an hour and a half, like feature length documentary. And having watched an awful lot of these, this one is very well put together. Just even to watch it, the scenes and how things are filmed look beautiful. And that's not something that a lot of attention is paid to in your average documentary. It's about presenting you with factual information with a few little like recreations thrown in there to sort of give you an idea. But this one cares about how it looks. It cares about the visual. It cares about creating something that's beautiful to look at, even though the subject matter obviously belies that entirely. I really was conscious watching it how well filmed it was, how certain scenes were set up and how beautiful they looked. So that's all plus points. If that's something that you like to see, you will get it here. It is a documentary of quality. It's very professional. It's very polished. It doesn't feel amateur at all. The recreations are all really well done. The acting in those recreations is fabulous. In saying there is those couple of scenes that maybe weren't needed, but for me, that didn't personally take me out of my enjoyment of the documentary. The subject matter is obviously riveting. I deliberately have not told you the crime that Emyr Owen is accused of having actually perpetrated outside of those letters. I want you to discover that for yourself. But law experts had to actually look up law books in order to try to work out what charge they were going to put against Emyr, because this hadn't ever come up before. They didn't know what to charge him with, so that in itself is really interesting. You're not watching something that you've probably seen before, and it is shocking that this 62-year-old, mild-mannered, quiet, unassuming, if a little bit weird, clergyman in the middle of this small Welsh village has been accused of something that he's been accused of. So for me, it was riveting. It was really interesting. I enjoyed delving into his psyche and enjoyed the history of his upbringing and school and how he was, and people that knew him back then would contribute to the documentary and say how he was as a child. His relationship with his family was brought into it. We get all the old pictures of childhood and stuff, which I'm a sucker for. I love all that backstory. So for me personally, it was a really enjoying watch. If the subject matter was a bit disturbing, I would thoroughly recommend this to you. I feel the positives outweigh the tiny negatives that for me personally weren't massive negatives. For me, the only thing I can say is perhaps they gave you too much too soon, and then the latter half of the documentary was struggling to give you that punch that the first half had. But if you're patient and if you like to work out why this happened, not just the salacious, oh my god, he did what, but you want to know why. You want to know, maybe not perhaps why, but how did he get to this point? Then yeah, I'd really recommend this to you. Superbly shot, really entertaining, beautiful to look at, nothing wrong with sound design, musical choices, nothing like that was jarring and pulled me out of it. I was aware as I was watching something that had been put together with a lot of care, with a lot of attention, that was really beautiful to look at, and that had a riveting subject matter. So if you like true crime, if you like to hear a psyche of a person, how it leads to that point, if you're a patient person, if you appreciate fantastic visuals, I would definitely tell you to check out the REV. So the REV did actually premiere on the 9th of October on the Icon Film channel, so I would strongly recommend if you can go out there and get a copy of this, you can stream it, check it out, because it is well worth a watch. So does this sound like something you would enjoy, or have you heard about the case of Emyr Owen? I hadn't up until seeing this documentary. I would encourage you, do not Google, do not look up what he's done. Go straight into the documentary and follow the story for yourself. It is perfectly put together for you to have a Scooby-Doo moment. So thanks so much for watching, guys. We would love to know what you think in the comments, if you think it would be something you would enjoy, if it's not really your cup of tea, and we look forward to speaking to you next time.